I've done it. I finally did it. I've moved out of my condo and I have moved in with my fiance into a temporary living space. This is not our new home, not our permanent forever home as we get married and start building a family together. But this is, for right now, this is my temporary filming space, I guess you would call it, office space, whatever. But don't get too used to these surroundings because I'm hoping to have a new home. Might take a couple of months, might take a year, I don't know, but we're definitely on the hunt for a new house. But for right now, these are going to be my new surroundings, so get used to it. Everyone, it has been a crazy couple of weeks, both in the world of professional wrestling and in my own personal life. On my end of things, wedding planning is really ramping up. My lovely fiance and I, we are getting ready to get married in September, but time's running out, and getting all of the planning finalized has been exceptionally nuts the last couple of weeks, but fortunately it looks like we're on the right path to getting everything all set and squared away, and hopefully the day goes off without a hitch, or at least, I mean, not necessarily perfectly, but it goes well enough to where there's no fires that need to be put out, and we're able to just enjoy our day and get married and start the beginning of our wonderful lives together. But that has eaten up a lot of my time in the last couple of weeks and getting ready for this thing in September. It's like, it feels like it's really far off, but it also feels like it's right around the corner. I have very, it's a very weird feeling, but I'm also excited and happy about it as well. But that's one of the reasons I haven't been around lately. Additionally, my computer crapped the holy heck out a couple of weeks ago. There was a Windows update and my computer crashed, and but I thought, oh, but wait, I have my data backed up, so I should be okay. Now, the data that I had backed up were several videos that I had already had in the can because I knew the wedding planning was going to take up a lot of my time, so I knocked a few videos out early, and then I would post those along the way over the next couple of weeks. These included part 1 of my Batman the Animated Series video reviews, which I have filmed part 1 twice now, so hopefully third time is a charm. This video, which became outdated almost immediately as the news with Vince McMahon had broken and everything like that, so now that we have a couple of pay-per-views for me to talk about and a few updates on the Vince McMahon situation, this will actually be a better version of that earlier video, but that video was lost. And there was one other one that got taken. Oh, my TNA video, which you'll be seeing that one. It's been refilmed, and you'll be seeing that one in the next couple of days. But basically, I thought I had all of those videos backed up, but then when I went to upload the files on the newly restored computer, I kept getting messages that the files were corrupted, and I couldn't upload them onto my computer. And then to make matters worse, my computer kept crapping out. The OS kept crashing, and I mean, that old computer was kind of on its last legs anyway, and I knew it was like, it's time to go get a new computer, which is not an expense I wanted to make in the middle of wedding planning, but it had to be done. So I am filming this on my brand new computer and editing it on my brand new computer, and I'm going to back up the files and everything, and hopefully nothing goes wrong this time. And I'm going to make doubly sure that the backups work well enough, and hopefully the next few videos I have lined up for you guys go off without a hitch. Again, I'm a positive thinker, and I'm a hopeful thinker, so hopefully everything goes okay, and I'm not scrambling having to refilm a lot of these again. So that's taken up my life for the last couple of weeks. Again, life's been crazy, life's been very hectic, but so is the world of professional wrestling. There's been a lot going on. WWE, we have the Vince McMahon situation that I alluded to earlier, and I mean, it's crazy to think that Vince has had to step away from managing the company and being the top official right now. I believe this is still the case. I haven't heard that this has changed, but Stephanie McMahon, who also recently stepped down for personal, as she stated, personal reasons, is now the temporary CEO of the WWE while they figure out this whole situation with Vince, with the board of directors doing an investigation of him and blah, 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 all that other fun stuff. As for the scandal itself, as long as Vince didn't embezzle the money, I don't know if it's really that big of a deal. I mean, if the woman involved was a willing partner and the money didn't come from WWE funds, it came from Vince's own personal bank accounts, which it's Vince, so I would imagine that would probably come from his own personal accounts. I don't really think there's much of a story here. I mean, can they really shame Vince McMahon out of his own company? I don't know. But as long as nothing illegal happened, I mean, yeah, I mean, we can pass moral judgments on him, say he's scummy and he's a piece of crap and everything else. But as far as like legally in the eyes of the law, I'm not sure. I'm not seeing anything that would necessitate Vince being forced to step down. But again, we'll see what the investigation reveals. We already have rape allegations against Vince that were brought up way back in 1992. Those have resurfaced, seen as relevant information compared to the current situation. But again, there's a lot we don't really know about what's going on. I will give Vince credit for this, though. Him coming out on SmackDown and Raw and basically trolling the audience, like giving them a wink and a nod over the situation that's going on and getting people to tune in to SmackDown just to see what the hell he's going to say while all this news is breaking, is a genius carny move. And it's like, you know, Vince can talk about himself as like the Walt Disney of wrestling and how he's a businessman and world-class entertainer and everything else. But at the end of the day, wrestling is a carny business, and Vince is still a goddamn carny through and through, and this is a perfect example of it. A brilliant move on his part, because I haven't watched SmackDown in forever, and I was like, well, I'm going to tune in just to see what Vince says. I mean, whatever. And he ultimately said nothing, which is like the biggest troll job ever. But yeah, we'll just have to wait and see how this situation unfolds and see if they really do uncover something where John Laurinaitis is also being implicated in a lot of this, and he's being investigated as well. I believe Bruce Pritchard has had to step in and fulfill some of his duties as head of talent relations. So a lot of craziness going on, a lot of turmoil in the WWE right now. But John Cena's back, celebrated his 20th anniversary on Raw. Now, you want to talk about things that intrigue me enough to get me to tune in and things that I couldn't care any less about. Cena's return and 20th anniversary falls into the latter category. And again, I said it in my last video, I fully understand that there are fans who grew up with John Cena as their hero. They watched him as kids and they grew up with the John Cena character. I fully understand that. I have those guys myself. I mean, I still mark out for Sting, and Sting is in his 60s. We all have those guys, and I fully understand that. Hogan was my guy when I was a kid. But Cena means nothing to me. I like him as Peacemaker. I'll give him that. I wish he would just keep playing Peacemaker. Rather than coming back to wrestling. I mean, granted, I wasn't going to watch Raw anyway, but certain guys can get my attention and get me to kind of tune in. Like WrestleMania, I tuned in because I knew Austin was going to be there, and I knew Cody Rhodes was going to be there. It's like, I love those guys. I'll check it out, see what's going on. And they got me for at least one night to tune into WrestleMania, and Cody's got me to watch at least one Raw and the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view because of his completely nutso courageous performance, but Cena's just never been that guy for me. Anybody who's followed my channel for any length of time, I'm not the biggest fan of the John Cena character. I got completely sick of him, and for me, he embodies an era of the WWE that made me hate wrestling, almost. So I don't have many fond memories of John Cena. My fondest memories of John Cena are the matches where he was the de facto heel and he lost, like Money in the Bank 2011 and One Night Stand 2006, and the match with Daniel Bryan. I believe that was SummerSlam 2013, I think it was. Those are my fondest memories of John Cena, like the situations where he's the mega heel by default and then ultimately loses. Other than that, I'm not going to tune in to see John Cena, but a lot of people will. And that's great. Y'all enjoy. More power to you. I don't want to take your hero away from you, but I am not going to start watching WWE just because John Cena's there. But I understand why they brought him in, because WWE's been kind of bit by the injury bug lately, and I do want to talk about that because it has, in an even greater capacity, has impacted AEW with the amount of injuries they've had, but WWE's had a couple of key ones, namely Randy Orton and Cody Rhodes, who were arguably, I mean, their two best faces at that point. I mean, granted, Randy Orton was in a tag team, a really over tag team that was working with people, and Randy seemed to have found new life and has rejuvenated his career in pairing with Matt Riddle. But and then you have Cody, who was almost instantly became the top face in the WWE after WrestleMania. So losing both of those guys is absolutely huge. And there's been a few other injuries as well. Then when you go to the AEW side of things, I mean, the injuries going on in AEW right now are just absolutely appalling. And it gets to a point where I'm like, are these guys not drinking milk? I know some people have an aversion to dairy products, but milk is loaded with calcium. And calcium is very good for your bones, and it's great for your body. It does a body good, like as the old slogan used to say. And when I look at all the guys that have gone down, they are big names too. CM Punk, Daniel Bryan. I keep calling him Daniel Bryan. You would think it would be the other way around. Bryan Danielson. Two losses that negatively impacted Forbidden Door in huge ways. Cost them some pretty big matches. Adam Cole got hurt at the Forbidden Door pay-per-view. Tomohiro Ishii was supposed to wrestle at Forbidden Door for New Japan. He got hurt. Red Dragon, both of them are down, which is insane. Like, how do both members of a tag team get hurt? And I think back to... I did a video on Starrcade 97 a couple years ago, and I mentioned something to the effect of, you know, everybody on that talks about that show, they talk about Hogan Sting and everything surrounding that match, the build-up and the payoff and how they messed up the main event and everything. One thing that a lot of people don't talk about with that pay-per-view is how snake-bit the damn thing was, because it was supposed to be Ric Flair versus Kurt Hennig in a steel cage match. That match had to get dropped because of Ric Flair needed surgery. And so this big grudge match that began building at Fall Brawl when Kurt Hennig turned on the Four Horsemen, that pay-per-view was supposed to be the payoff to that feud, and it didn't happen because of an injury. It was supposed to have Raven versus Chris Benoit, and that would have been a great match to have, but Raven was unable to perform. One of the big main event matches, probably the second biggest match on the show, well, third biggest. I think Zbyszko and Bischoff was probably the second biggest, but one of the bigger matches on that show was the Giant and Kevin Nash, the Battle of the Giants. And that match got, they couldn't do it because Kevin Nash had a medical emergency the night before or the day of the show or something. Now, many people have accused Nash of refusing to put the Giant over. I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know all the details. What I do know is that Kevin Nash kind of has a history and stuff like that. So it's kind of like when you see the pattern, it's kind of like, I don't know. But in any case, Starrcade 97 was a snake-bit show where it just felt like God was striking that pay-per-view down. Forbidden Door somehow managed to be even crazier than that because it was just, it felt like every week, like somebody was getting hurt. And they would keep trying to set up like something great for the pay-per-view. Like, all right, they're going to do Punk versus Tanahashi for the AEW title. That's pretty cool. Oh, wait, Punk's hurt. Can't do it. It's like, all right, that's a shame. Then it was, they were teasing Bryan Danielson and Zack Saber Jr., which that would have probably been worth the price of admission for me alone, but then Danielson got hurt. And it was like, oh my God, what is going on there? It's absolutely insane. The thing, Tomohiro Ishii, that I think putting him in that match with Miro, at the very least, you would have had two, like, you know, brawling big guys, like, kind of knock into each other like two bulls, and that would have been fun. We didn't get that because of the injury to Ishii. It was just a wild and crazy situation. The fact that AEW was even able to put the show on is somewhat miraculous. That they were able to come through and get through that pay-per-view is remarkable in its own right. But the injury bug has really, really been bad, especially in AEW. And I don't know what's going on. Again, maybe it's, guys, drink some milk. Get some, or if you don't like dairy products, get some calcium in your system, for the love of God. It's and granted, I'm not a professional wrestler. I don't throw myself at the ground for a living, but I am quite the clumsy boy, and I have fallen down and hit my head my fair share of times because I'm fairly clumsy. But broken bones have been somewhat minimal for me, despite some of the nasty falls I've had, because it's like, well, I drink a lot of milk, so it certainly helps. I've got strong bones, and it's like, I recommend it. Just drink some milk. It's good for you. It really is, I promise. But yeah, just a series of very unlucky scenarios for AEW heading into this cross-promotional event. But with all that said, I did finally get a chance to watch the show right before Dynamite. I finished watching it right before Dynamite, the Blood and Guts Dynamite, so I can talk about all of it, and I'm happy to do so because I have a lot to say. Now, my overall impression of Forbidden Door, again, I kind of went into it with fairly low expectations because I really felt like the card wasn't as good as it could have been. The injuries definitely played a role in bringing it down, but I decided I was going to check it out. I was going to watch it, and unfortunately, because of craziness going on in my life and because I went to the movies on Sunday, I didn't get to watch it until Tuesday, earlier before Dynamite. And I gotta say, I enjoyed it. It was overall a pretty good show. I didn't love it. Again, I think it's a miracle that this show even got off the ground and they were even able to make it a pretty good show overall. It's filled with action, and I think if you're familiar with New Japan, there are plenty of things to kind of mark out for and enjoy. But again, I think the concept wasn't executed as well as it could have been. The biggest issue I had is that there were way too many multi-person matches. Way too many. Singles, it kind of almost felt like WrestleMania 2000 a little bit. Much better than that, obviously, but kind of had that same vibe to it where it's just every match had way too many bodies flying around. You had 2 trios matches. There were 2 4-way matches for belts. And it just kind of felt like a little over-bloated, and I felt like you probably could have trimmed some of them out and maybe do a battle royal on the pre-show to make up for some of those guys and have a more straightforward card in that regard. But overall, despite my misgivings, I overall thought the show, they got out of it fairly well for the most part. It wasn't a disaster of a pay-per-view by any means, so I'll give them that. When it felt like God himself was trying to strike this entire show down, they managed to make it work. They managed to make a fairly entertaining show from start to finish, and I'll give it credit, it didn't feel long. It didn't crack 4 hours, which, thank God, that's a victory in today's day and age. But it didn't feel long, it didn't drag, it was just kind of it never reached epic levels where I felt like I'd seen something truly amazing, but it was consistently entertaining all the way throughout. It's the best way I would describe it. But as I go through all of these matches, I'm also going to point out ways where I feel like they could have been better. So with that said, let's start with the pre-show. I thought all of the pre-show matches, they had 3 of them, were serviceable pre-show matches for that were good at kind of warming the crowd up and getting them ready for the show as a whole. We had, I'm looking at the card here, we had Hiroki Goto and Yoshihashi. I'm actually a little surprised that Goto was on the pre-show. Defeating QT Marshall and Aaron Solo in a fairly solid tag match. Then you had a good Haas fight, Lance Archer taking on Nick Comoroto and getting the win. This is more of an AEW match, but Lance Archer's kind of a guy that goes back and forth between both, but he's I don't know, he's had such a fairly big presence in AEW that this just felt like an AEW match rather than AEW versus New Japan. I'll have more to say on that in a little bit. And the final tag match on the pre-show was Swerve in Our Glory. Is that really their name? Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland taking on El Desperado and Kanemaru of Suzuki-gun. It was pretty much Lee and Swerve doing their thing, and that was basically, again, it was a serviceable tag match to warm people up and get them ready for the main show. So to that end, it worked. And oh my God, there was actually a 4th. They crammed a lot into this pre-show. The 8-man tag, 8-man tag, Max Caster and the Gun Club, Billy, Austin, and Colton, which that story developed more on Dynamite. I'll get into that in a little bit. taking on members of the New Japan Dojo, a bunch of people I've never really heard of. Alex Coughlin, the DKC, Kevin Knight, Yuya Yamura, I think it was. And now this ended up being a 4-on-2 as Danhausen debuted his Ass Boys theme song music video, which caused Austin and Colton to run off and chase him down, leaving Billy Gunn and Max Caster by themselves to get the job done on their own. Unfortunately, even with the 4-on-2 odds, Max Caster and Billy Gunn were able to pretty easily defeat their opponents, and the storyline involving the Gun Club and the Acclaimed continued to develop on Dynamite with a really entertaining trios match with Danhausen getting FTR as his partner. The intro was great, I thought. How did he phrase it? It's like, well, I went and found 2 partners. They're pretty good at wrestling, I think. And then FTR comes out, which was pretty great. But then it's like, Billy Gunn's loyalties to his son is being tested by the Acclaim because he seems to be getting along better with the Acclaim. So we'll have to see how all of that plays out. I love the Acclaimed. I think they're great. Max Caster, his raps are awesome. And I think another one bit by the injury bug, Anthony Bowens, he adds a lot. He's found his own spot in the introductions, and he does really well for himself too. So he seems to be back though. He got out of the wheelchair on Dynamite earlier tonight, so hopefully we're back to having the Acclaim back, and hopefully they get set up to move up the card because they're really good, and I'd like to see more of them. I think they have a lot of personality, and I think that counts for a lot in the world of professional wrestling. So, I've talked enough about the pre-show. Let's get into the main card. We started off with the trios match with Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara teaming up with the Japanese psychopath himself, Minoru Suzuki, one of my all-time favorites, taking on Eddie Kingston, Wheeler Yuta, and Shota Umino, I think I'm saying that right. I'm not sure. Not somebody I'm overly familiar with, but somebody that does have a beef with Chris Jericho going back a couple of years. This was a nice hot opener. The crowd was really into Eddie, and I gotta say, seeing Eddie Kingston and Suzuki square off was actually pretty cool. That was fun to see, but it was just a really entertaining match, and the crowd was red hot for it, provided a lot of good action. Everybody played their roles well. And the babyfaces, the babyfaces lost, actually. Suzuki, Chris Jericho, and Sammy Guevara got the win, which I guess probably would have telegraphed the outcome of Blood and Guts a couple of nights later. But again, I thought this was a really hot opener, perfect choice to open up the show, and it worked really well. Next up, we got a match that wasn't as good as it could have been, and I'll explain why. Winner takes all tag team championship match. The ROH tag team titles and the IWGP tag team titles. I have lots to say about the belts situation. I'll talk about that more when I talk about the All Atlantic Championship. But FTR defending the ROH titles against United Empire members Great-O-Khan and Jeff Cobb, the IWGP tag team champions, and Roppongi Vice in a triple threat match. Now, I would have liked this match a lot more if Roppongi Vice was not in it and it was just FTR working with United Empire. I think they would have had a more traditional tag match. The stuff that they did together I thought was pretty good. Even with the injury fake out or whatever that was, that added a little bit more drama to the situation, but also felt undercut because you had a whole other team out there. So it was kind of like that part of the story, if it was deliberate, kind of felt haphazard. And I think this match would have flowed much better if it was just a normal tag match. It was FTR versus United Empire. I think the match would have been way more enjoyable. But for what it was an action-packed tag match with bodies flying all over the place, and it worked in that regard. And thank God FTR got the win. And they have a ton of belts. They've got the ROH belts. They've got the IWGP belts. They've got the AAA belts. They should go to Impact and get those belts. And then they should, go to WWE and win those belts. Go back to NXT, win those. Just give FTR all the tag belts. Be flippin' hilarious. But anyway, yeah, that was it was solid for what it was, but I think it would have been much better with one of the teams removed from it. And again, I'm not saying don't put Roppongi Vice on the card. I'm saying it's like do a battle royal, put them in there. Like they don't need to be in the tag title match. But that's my opinion. Then we had the four-way match to crown the first ever All-American AEW champion. A brand new championship invented by Tony Khan, that cocaine-snorting lunatic. I don't want to. I don't want to assume, but there's a part of me thinks Tony's on cocaine. But anyway, we had Pac the Bastard, Miro, Malachi Black representing the House of Black, and Clark Connors, a guy who I've never seen before, stepping in for the injured Tomohiro Ishii. And losing Ishii really took away from this match. But more important than the match itself, I want to talk about AEW's title situation, which is something that was in one of the videos that got lost. So I'll just put it here. AEW has way too many title belts. Like, way, way too many. Especially when you consider that ROH has worked into the company. You got, and to me, right now, it's like, they're basically AEW belts at this point because they're being defended fairly regularly on AEW programming. They're doing programs for Ring of Honor titles on AEW programming. They're basically AEW belts. And right now in AEW, you've got the World title, the TNT title, the All-Atlantic title, won by Pac. Then for the women, you've got the AEW Women's title, the TBS title, and then you've got the tag titles. Okay, doesn't sound like much. It's like, all right, you got 6. That's not a lot. But then you've got the All-Atlantic Champion. But then you've got all the ROH belts, which has a world title, the Pure title, the TV title, the tag titles, and a women's title. So that's a lot more. That raises it by my count to 11, I believe. And then it goes even higher when you take into account that IWGP belts and AAA belts are regularly, not regularly, but sporadically defended on AEW programming. And then it goes up even more when you consider that the FTW Championship is floating around. Granted, it's an unsanctioned title. It's similar in the vein to the $1 Million Championship, but it's a belt that's featured on AEW programming, and Ricky Starks is walking around carrying a belt. So it has the image of another guy with a belt, even if it's a non-sanctioned one. And then Adam Cole and Britt Baker won the Owen Hart tournaments and got the Owen Hart Memorial belts, one for the men, one for the women. Again, those belts are not defended. They're essentially just trophies, but they're still, last I checked, they were still walking around with those belts. So that's 2 more people walking around with belts in the company. And it forces everything, it kind of becomes convoluted, and it kind of makes the visual of having a belt a lot less important and a lot less significant because so many people are walking around with belts. And there's rumors that they're going to add more. I've read articles of people wanting AEW to put a women's tag team division together, and I'm like, are you out of your mind? They already have 3 women's titles, 4 if you count the Owen Hart belt. That's not, they're spread too thin as it is. And we're all but, I'm waiting for the announcement that they're going to do trios titles, which I'll say this right now. For the love of God, do not do trios title belts. Please, I am begging you. Or, if you're going to do trios title belts, drop the 2-man tag title. Because, and I'll use Lucha Underground as an example. When Lucha Underground did trios titles, they didn't have a second set of tag titles floating around. They picked a lane, and they stayed in it. And it created some problems because people kept getting hurt. And I guess when you have to account for 3 people instead of 2, the chances of injuries impacting your plans for those belts get raised significantly. And it's much harder to fill 3-man teams than it is 2-man teams. But if you're going to do trios titles, and here's the idea I have, it's like, all right, do it in a way where the belts can be defended in either 2-man situations or 3-man situations. What I mean is, basically turn them into the Freebird Tag Team Championships, where 3-man teams, where you have a third man who's like the single star that fills out the trios team, and then you have the regular tag team that defends the 2-man belts in 2-man situations. But then when they need to defend them in trio situations, then they bring the third man on board, and round we go there. So that's kind of like basically combine the 2-man titles and the 3-man titles, because I got to tell you, I've seen companies try to balance both IWGP, Ring of Honor, which thank God they do not have the Ring of Honor 6-man tag titles. If they had those, I would probably throw something at the screen, but you can't do both. Like, doing both is folly. Don't do it. For the love of God, do not do it. You stretch yourselves way, 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 way too thin. And if you're going to do it, again, do it in a way that I've kind of described, just to make it a little less crazy. You'll have less belts floating around, and it won't be, because when I was a kid, like, being a champion actually meant something. When Bret Hart won the Intercontinental title, that was like a big deal, because it was like, oh my God, Bret Hart got a singles belt. And nowadays it's like you show up to work and you get a belt. Almost, that's the image that Impact is. Or not Impact, AEW has kind of created now. And it's like I mentioned FTR earlier. They're walking around with, 3 sets of tag titles. It's, it's kind of, it's a bit much. And then you want to throw trios titles on top of all that. You've got the women's, let's do women's tag titles. And I'm like, what, dude, you've got the women's title, the TBS title, you've got a Ring of Honor women's title, like that. You've already got 3 women's titles. Your division has been spread thin enough. Like, you need to like start lessening the number of your titles, not adding. And I'm trying to think of ways to kind of fix this, because they right now they just have way too many belts. I think with situation like the Owen Hart belts, you can present them with the belts the night they win the tournament, and then we just don't see them. After that, there's no reason for Britt and Adam Cole to be walking around with those belts, at least in my opinion, especially since they're not going to be defended anyway. So it's like, just kind of reduce the impression that that having a belt doesn't mean as much. And you'll do that by reducing the number of belts that are featured on your wrestling programming. So I'm thinking think about unifying the TNT title with the All-Atlantic title and creating one definitive mid-card title. Maybe, one big thing, they need to figure out what to do with Ring of Honor. Is it going to get its own show? I've had the idea, it's like, look, you've got 2 YouTube shows, and they're both just basically dark matches. Why don't you just take one of those shows and turn it into Ring of Honor? And do Ring of Honor storylines on one of the YouTube shows, either Dark or Elevation, and do like a definitive brand split where ROH and AEW, even though they're managed by the same people, they're run as separate entities, kind of like NXT is to WWE's main rosters of Raw and SmackDown. Like, do an actual brand split rather than this. Everybody shares the spotlight and everybody shares TV time, and I don't know how ROH even figures into all of this, and it's very confusing, it's very messy, and it's a situation they need to figure out. So if Ring of Honor is going to get its own show, then those belts need to be separated, and they need to have Ring of Honor needs to have its own show with its own roster and just run separately. If it's not going to get its own show, which there's talk that they're getting ready to do another Ring of Honor pay-per-view, so who knows, but if they don't get their own show, then they need to start dropping those Ring of Honor titles, start unifying a bunch of belts, like unify the ROH and AEW titles, unify the all the mid-card belts into one championship, unify the women's titles into one championship. Now, the TBS title works right as like a vehicle for Jade Cargill, and I understand that. But part of me would consider maybe having Jade unify the TBS and women's titles just to kind of reduce the number of women's belts. Maybe do a triple threat where it's like Thunder Rosa versus Jade Cargill versus who's the Ring of Honor Women's Champ, Mercedes Martinez, and winner takes all match, and Jade Cargill just unifies all the belts basically. Do something like that, and then maybe you could have room for women's tag titles, because right now it's like, no, you are spread way too thin for that. That I can tell you right now, that is not going to work. Impact has women's tag team titles again, and it's like, but why though? You have like 6 women on your roster, if that. Like, I don't even know. Like, I don't know. It's just maybe I'm just ranting a little bit too much. But my point is, AEW has too many belts that it's an issue that they really, really, really need to get under control. We have 2 world champions right now because they, instead of stripping Punk, they created the interim world championship. So that's a thing. Again, too many belts. Too many belts. I mean, I get that was like they were dealt a bad hand and they had to figure something out, but still. Anyway, so I've talked almost nothing about this 4-way match. Match itself was fine. It was pretty much what you would expect it. I definitely... credit to Clark Connors. He took an opportunity, he ran with it. He poured his heart and soul into this match to try and stand out. I still think it would have been better to have Ishii there, but he did the best he could to fill that void. And, you got some nice action out of it from the people involved. It was a fairly typical 4-way, and Pat got the win. So I don't know what the All-Atlantic title's role is going to be. Is it going to be like an Intercontinental title? Is it going to be kind of like the Traveler's belt, kind of like what the U.S. title is for New Japan, where it's like largely defended outside of Japan? Is it going to be that? I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see how that title fixture is fixed into AEW storylines moving forward. But again, too many belts. So it's hard for me to care. Next up, we had another trios match. The Dudes with Attitudes, Darby Allin, Sting, and Shingo Takagi, taking on members of the Bullet Club, the Young Bucks, and El Phantasmo. I love Sting. Like, Sting just makes me happy, and he was the star of this match, so, like, that his entrance was one of the craziest moments on the show and really made me jump out of my chair. And Sting just being Sting the whole time really made the match worth it. So this is one of the more enjoyable matches on the show for me, mainly because of Sting. And it's like, dude, I just sit there and I go, man, this dude's in his 60s and he's still, I'm like a giddy 2-year-old whenever I watch him. It's kind of amazing. And they've presented Sting really well because wisely they've kept him exclusively in tag team matches, which I think is the right way to go with him at his age. And Sting looks great as a result. There were a couple of miscommunications where I felt like Sting forgot a spot or something, but again, because he's in a tag team, it's easier to cover those type of things up. And Sting looked like Sting, so that was all there was. And ultimately, they got the win as well. So Sting gets another victory on pay-per-view, which was fun for me because I love Sting. I'm a big fan of the guy. And credit to them bringing back the name Dudes with Attitudes. An old standby with Sting going back to the early 90s when he first won the title at the Great American Bash. And this group of friends that helped him out. But next up was a match that I felt had no business being on this card because it was a straight-up AEW match. Thunder Rosa successfully defended the AEW Women's title against Toni Storm. Now, I'm not saying the match was bad. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that this is a show that was sold on AEW, mixing it up with New Japan. And I would have thought, and from what I've heard, I think Tony Khan confirmed this, they tried to reach out to Stardom to get one of Stardom's stars to wrestle Thunder Rosa, which would have worked. But none of the Stardom talents had visas, so it was kind of an idea that fell through. And so they just kind of did this match. Personally, I think Thunder Rosa and Toni Storm is a match that could have been saved for later. They didn't have to rush into this pay-per-view. And yeah, on any other AEW show, it would have felt like a fairly normal match. Here, it just kind of stood out because it's 2 AEW talents. There's no, attempt at creating a dream match scenario or attempt at some kind of cross-promotional cooperation or cross-promotional booking. It's just a fairly normal match that you would expect to see on Dynamite or any pay-per-view. And that's not what the show was sold on, so this match just kind of wound up sticking out like a sore thumb. Unfortunately, it undercut what the two women could have potentially done with each other, I think, because this was not the time to be doing this match, and I felt like they could have built this up for longer and had a better match down the road. But the match itself was okay. Thunder Rosa got the win, retained the title, so there's that. Next up, we got the very interesting United States Championship match with Will Ospreay successfully defending against Orange Cassidy. This was Orange Cassidy's first match in a while since the injury, and this was an interesting clash of styles, as it were, because I think Will Ospreay is like the new AJ Styles and is an amazing high-flying talent that can do just about anything. And then you have Orange Cassidy, who's largely a comedy character that prides himself on doing very little and getting huge reactions. So putting those two together created a fairly interesting dynamic where Ospreay seemed frustrated with Orange Cassidy and like didn't really know how to work with him, and I thought the match came off very well as a result of that. I think it's there was kind of a natural, like, Will Ospreay is like a top tier athlete, and then you've got this cartoon character that puts his hands in his pockets and tries to wrestle you that way, and even uses putting his hands in his pockets to counter moves and stuff. So it was very both men are very unorthodox. Will Ospreay for his innovative offense, and Orange Cassidy for being the guy that doesn't care but can still beat people with minimal effort. So yeah, I like the chemistry that both guys had. I thought the match itself was very, very fun. One of the better matches on the show. And it was very entertaining. And Will Ospreay got to shine on an American stage and looked very, very good and got rave reviews, as he should. He's great. Next up, we had Zack Saber Jr. taking on the mystery opponent that was handpicked by Bryan Danielson. And that is the one, the only, Claudio Castagnoli. Fresh off his WWE run, he is now back to being the Claudio of old, where he can pretty much cut loose and do whatever he wants, at least in the ring. And he went out there and had a very nice match with Zack Saber Jr., who, for me personally, might be my favorite worker in the business today. He's kind of like, look, I said that Will Ospreay is like the new AJ Styles. Zack Saber Jr. is like the new Bret Hart for me, where it's like he can go in that ring and make every little move that he does and every little transition out of a move that he does means so much. And he has really, really good matches as a result. And he's one of those guys that you would think he'd be limited in his style because he is so purely technical that he can only have good matches with guys that are of a similar style to him, but he's able to adjust to just about anybody. And case in point, I thought the match with Claudio was overall really, really good and a great introduction for Claudio. And it seems like AEW might have big plans for him since he played a fairly big role in the Blood and Guts match. So we'll see how all that plays out for Claudio, but it's great to have him here. He is and granted, we talk all the time about AEW's bloated roster. Lord knows I've said plenty. I'm kind of thinking maybe they should have had Claudio win the All-Atlantic title, but yeah, whatever. But yeah, I thought the match itself came off really well, and I think Claudio's going to fit in fairly well. And here's the thing about Claudio. He's a guy that WWE always kind of pulled the rug out from under. He'd have a really good match with somebody, and then they'd pull the rug out from under him. He'd get the giant swing over, and then they'd pull the rug out from under him, and they kept doing it. And it's like, look, I'm not saying Claudio should be world champion or anything. What I'm saying is, it's like you have this guy who's an amazing athlete that's as strong as an ox. That guy, you can come up with something for him to do. And he clearly connected with the WWE audience to some degree, as indicated during his performance in Blood and Guts, where he crossed paths with his former tag team partner, Jake Hager, and the crowd reacted accordingly. So, good for Claudio. I thought he had a very good showing here. Of course, he went over because there was no other outcome, and the match came off really well. Next up was a match that did not come off so well. Jay White successfully defending the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship against Hangman Adam Page, Adam Cole, and the Rainmaker Kazuchika Okada. This is another situation where it's too many bodies flying around. It's a multi-man match that did not need to be a multi-man match. I personally feel like it should have been Hangman and Rainmaker one-on-one, the Buckshot versus the Rainmaker Lariat, and we see who's got the better specialized lariat, and just tell that story and have fun with it, and maybe do Jay White versus Adam Cole for the IWGP titles, kind of an internal combustion between Bullet Club members, which was part of this story anyway, so they could have just as easily done that. They didn't do that, and as a result, the four-way was mostly okay, and you got some good interactions between Okada and Hangman, which just made me go, like, why didn't they just do a singles match between these two? But in any case, it felt like a waste of Okada, like, to put him in a four-way match. It's like, dude, he's like the best wrestler that New Japan's had in the last decade. Then you put him in just a random four-way. It's like, come on. He's like the greatest world champ in the last since the turn of the century in terms of his body of work. Not necessarily drawing power, but in his body of work, I would put Okada's run as IWGP champion up against anybody. And here it just kind of felt like an interchangeable cog that was put into this match because they needed a fourth body, which felt like a waste to me. But like I said, the match itself was going fine up until the finish where Adam Cole clearly got concussed and they had to kind of dig their way out of it and come up with a fairly weak finish that even Jim Ross on commentary said was anticlimactic. It's like, wow, he didn't even try to cover it. He just straight up said it was anticlimactic, and it was. I was not a fan of this match. I felt like it could have been, like I said, I think if they'd gone the two singles match route, it would have been much better. And again, you could have made room for that by trimming a few bodies here and there, a few minutes here and there, and just do a battle royal on the pre-show to incorporate all the people that I'd be cutting out of these matches. But in any case, that was the IWGP World Heavyweight title match. Let's move on to a much better match, Jon Moxley versus Hiroshi Tanahashi to crown the new AEW Interim World Heavyweight Champion. Of course, Moxley won. That was never a debate for me. That was obvious. But to their credit, I think both men went out there and had a hard-hitting, stiff fest of a match that came off really, really well, and it was like, well, at least Moxley got to have a great match when he won the belt that he was obviously going to win. So at least it ended well in that regard. We also got a beatdown from the Jericho Appreciation Society on Moxley and to further build into the Blood and Guts match, which I guess I'll talk about right now. Now, what I will say is that using Forbidden Door to further build into Blood and Guts only kind of highlighted how, I guess, inconsequential Forbidden Door really was. It was just kind of this fun cross-promotional idea that they had, but it didn't really impact major AEW storylines moving forward, except getting the interim belt on Jon Moxley, crowning the All-Atlantic Champion, which is a belt I question whether or not should even exist in the first place, and adding a little bit of fuel to the fire for Blood and Guts, which isn't going to include any of the New Japan guys. So whatever. But anyway, getting into Blood and Guts, I thought that this one, the Jericho Appreciation Society versus the Blackpool Combat Club, Eddie Kingston and friends and his buddies, I thought it came off better than the last one they did with Inner Circle versus the Pinnacle. I thought that did... I thought overall it was like a wild, violent brawl, which you would expect from a War Game style match. I love that they used two rings. That was something that TNA always struggled with, where all of their Lethal Lockdown matches were in one ring. It's like, so you get a two-ring War Game style match, which is the way it should be. I think maybe they had a few too many bodies in there. They had 6 on each team. It's like, you could have shortened that down to 5, and I think you'd be okay. Sammy Guevara is absolutely insane. The fall he took was crazy. Got a lot of blood and violence and thumbtacks and all the other hardcore goodies that you expect in a match like this. But going back to the whole issue of having too many bodies in there, War Games is one of those matches where you can't win the match until everybody's entered, and so that's a really long stretch of time where no outcome can happen, and when you have extra bodies in there, that goes even longer. So you have like the first 2/3 of the match, nothing of consequence really happens, and that's why these matches are like, I enjoy War Games matches. I did a whole video about how much I enjoy War Games matches, but they're a very, very hard match to book in that regard. And I think maybe if AEW wanted to kind of put their own stamp on this style of match, maybe they could do something where members of the team can be eliminated before everybody's entered. Once everybody's entered, then it becomes one fall to a finish, but people can be eliminated along the way, and you could get to the final, the match begins with like a 4-on-2 advantage or something. Something like that to kind of add a little bit more intrigue to the match, because it is hard to kind of invest on a really long period until anything is allowed to happen. But all that said, I thought the match came off fairly well as a wild, chaotic, violent brawl. And it looks like they're setting up something between Eddie Kingston and Claudio, which could be fun, because I think Kingston brings a lot of energy to whatever he does, and I think Claudio can work with just about anybody. So I'd like to see what those two can do together. But they might not do it right away. I don't know. All we saw is that Claudio got the win just as Kingston was about to make Jericho tap out again and get his final, hurrah victory over Jericho, and he felt like that was taken from him. I also heard that there was another injury during the match. It was either Santana or Ortiz, I don't remember, but it's like, good Lord, everybody gets hurt. It's crazy. Maybe because AEW's been kind of burning on all cylinders lately. When you look at the last not Forbidden Door, but the last pay-per-view they did, Double or Nothing, that crazy-ass Anarchy in the Asylum match that they did, and like they're always doing these crazy matches, and it's like, in addition to my advice on drinking milk or getting calcium supplements to kind of strengthen your body, I would also recommend not doing these crazy matches all the time and kind of like being a little safer in that regard. But in any case, Blood and Guts was entertaining. I thought it came off well enough. It was a pretty solid payoff to the building storyline between the two factions. And that's really all there is to say about it. There's a couple of interesting things coming out of Dynamite, like Christian's heel turn, and now Luchasaurus is on his side, even though he beat up Jungle Boy. Luchasaurus is staying with him. Now Luchasaurus is evil. I would have liked to have seen that change get built up over time rather than just doing it right away. But that's kind of interesting, to say the least. But again, we'll see how it all goes. But coming out of Forbidden Door, I think AEW, they kind of... the worst is over, hopefully, with the injuries, and they can kind of keep trucking and kind of keep doing their own thing and get back to kind of making things matter again. Because Wardlow, who was one of their hottest faces coming out of Double or Nothing, had no role to play at Forbidden Door and is kind of stuck in a situation where he's working with the TNT champion, who is also injured. So it's like, Wardlow's... And they had that really awkward match where Wardlow wrestled 20 guys, the security guards, which on paper sounded cool, but seeing it in execution, it just came off as very clunky and awkward. But they need to get Wardlow back on track. They need to fix a lot of the creative, kind of tighten it up. Just tighten up the writing and get that stuff back to the glory days and handle the title situation as well, so where there's not 45 belts on one event. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Forbidden Door and Blood and Guts. Overall, AEW, I think they got out of this, considering all the bad news that they'd had leading into the event. I felt like they came out of it mostly okay. Blood and Guts came off mostly okay, sans the potential injury. Again, I don't know the extent of it, but we shall see how it all turns out. But overall, I was entertained by the AEW events, even though a lot of the issues with them continue to rear their ugly heads, and hopefully they're able to fix those moving forward. Now, before I sign off for tonight, I want to talk about one more pay-per-view that I watched recently, and that was Impact Wrestling's Slammiversary 2022, the event that commemorated Impact Wrestling's 20th anniversary, and I guess I should just congratulate them for making it to this huge milestone. They've been around for 20 years, and that is absolutely insane to me. When you think about the ups and downs and the hard roads that TNA, now Impact Wrestling, has gone over for the last 2 decades, it's amazing to think that this company's lasted longer than WCW, lasted longer than ECW, outlasted Ring of Honor, and Ring of Honor's fate is still kind of up in the air, even though Tony Khan technically owns it. There's no official Ring of Honor program on right now. Impact is it's persevered, despite everything and all the pitfalls that it's falling into, and it's actually gotten into a nice little holding pattern where it's found its own little niche in the larger wrestling world, and Overall, I thought Slammiversary was a fun show and a celebration. When Ring of Honor did Final Battle last year, that show kind of felt like a funeral. This one felt like a party, and this one was just a full-on commemoration of everything that TNA had done up to this point, everything that Impact Wrestling had done up to this point, the highs and the lows, all of it, and just talking about the history of the event and kind of making a big party out of it. I thought it was great that throughout the show they got certain wrestlers to send in videos talking about their favorite matches and moments from when they worked in TNA. Sting was there. Very appropriate. Kurt Angle was there. Very appropriate. And AJ Styles, on loan from WWE, was allowed to send in a comment. And you can't have a show commemorating 20 years of TNA, total nonstop action, and Impact Wrestling without the phenomenal AJ Styles, who was Mr. TNA pretty much the entire time he was there. They had big names. They had big stars like the Stings, like the Kurt Angles, and those guys, but AJ Styles was their homegrown superstar. That was like their guy, and really losing AJ Styles was a huge blow to them that they never quite recovered from, in my opinion. It's always felt like there's been something missing ever since AJ left, but it was great to see him here. It was great to hear him. He was voted the top male wrestling star in company history and the top X Division star in company history, both of which well-deserved. Gail Kim was voted the top female performer in Impact Wrestling history. Absolutely, definitely, without a doubt. And the Motor City Machine Guns were voted the top tag team. I don't know if I agree with that one. I would have leaned more towards either America's Most Wanted or Beer Money Inc. America's Most Wanted actually made a cameo appearance on the show. A lot of cameo appearances throughout the night. There was also a very nice tribute to Mike Tenay and Don West, who were the original commentary team for many, many years for TNA and Impact Wrestling. So it was nice to see them get acknowledged and also raise awareness about Don West's health battles that he's going through right now. My best wishes go to Don West. I actually really liked Mike and Don as a commentary team because Mike Tenay brought the knowledge, and Don West, as a salesman by trade, just knew how to add like energy and excitement into everything because he was trying to sell everything like it was the greatest match in the world. I remember watching him when my sister was into Beanie Babies, and she would watch him on some shopping channel like trying to sell Beanie Babies, and I remember laughing my ass off at how it's like this man is selling Beanie Babies like it's the most important thing on the planet, but he's doing the job, and he's doing a really good job of it. But that was just really funny. And by the way, for you youngins out there was a time when Beanie Babies were like the hottest thing on the planet. There was a solid year there where they were like the top collectible in the world. So, but anyway, I thought that this entire pay-per-view was a lot of fun and a nice. If you grew up a TNA fan, kind of like I did, because let me talk about my experiences with TNA and Impact Wrestling and what it means to me, because it does. I do have a soft spot for Impact Wrestling, mainly because I started watching in 2004, and this was a time, it had been a few years since WCW was gone and ECW was gone, and while WWE was not terrible at this point, I mean, Raw from WrestleMania 20 to SummerSlam of that year I thought was excellent, with Benoit as champion and the matches that Triple H and Shawn and Benoit were having, with the rise of Randy Orton and Shelton Benjamin, probably the best run of his career. Edge was starting to develop into something. We got a brief return of Mick Foley. Like, Raw was actually excellent in 2004 for the most part. SmackDown was terrible, but I liked JBL as champion. So I was like, yeah, he's a good, solid, old school heel. I enjoy him at least. He's literally the only reason I watched SmackDown throughout that year, but WWE was not that bad. It's just I got sick of having just WWE. I missed having options and different flavors of wrestling. You know, I love chocolate ice cream. I don't want to eat chocolate ice cream exclusively. And I was starved for something different because up to that point for the last few years it was all WWE. TNA had started in 2002 with the weekly pay-per-views. I'm not buying weekly pay-per-views every week. That's not a sustainable business model. And I remember saying at the time, it's like, look, get on TV and then we'll talk. Ring of Honor had to buy DVDs to keep up with the Ring of Honor product. So generally, my experience with Ring of Honor was like I would get the occasional DVD every now and then, whenever somebody would recommend something to me. But I couldn't keep up with it regularly. It was just like, oh, that's neat. I got this DVD and I watched it. It's like, okay, that's neat, but it's not something I can like regularly invest in. But then when Impact got onto FSN with the Fox box, where they had like the timer for each match, show how much time was left with the two names on the top of the screen. I loved that. It was great. It was a great way to help me ease into the product so I could learn who everybody was, and I liked the it was a different style of format. But I remember that first episode of Impact like it was yesterday. I remember they had Abyss versus Shark Boy. They had Team Canada versus Team Mexico. America's Most Wanted won back the NWA Tag Team titles from the team of Kid Cash and a very young Lance Archer, who at the time was going by the name Dallas, who had to change that name when DDP signed with TNA, and he became Lance Hoyt. But yeah, AMW impressed me because I love tag teams. And then the main event was a 4-way X Division match with AJ Styles taking on, I believe, it was Chris Sabin, Michael Shane, not Matt Bentley yet, and Elix Skipper. And the winner would get to face Kazarian at the next Wednesday pay-per-view for the X Division title. And I knew right away, it's like, there's something special about that AJ guy. He's a cut above the rest of these high-flying cruiserweight types. And Abyss really won me over. America's Most Wanted really won me over. And I don't want to say I was hooked right away, but it was kind of like, it gave me exactly what I was looking for in terms of like, it was different. It was just something different. It was a fun way to enjoy wrestling. It was an hour-long show. I could watch it every week. And it was something to, kind of help me get my wrestling fix without having to rely entirely on WWE. So that was great. And I stood with TNA for a while. My favorite era of TNA is when they got onto Spike TV and like that first year from 05 to 06. That was when I felt like creatively they were at their best. They were kind of firing on all cylinders, where you had Jeff Jarrett as the NWA World Champion, as kind of this classic old school heel. I love Jeff Jarrett, by the way, big fan of his. The tag team division was top notch because you had America's Most Wanted, who was great, and you had Team Canada, the Dudley Boys, Team 3D had just come on board. They had no shortage of tag teams, which was really good. And then LAX was in its developmental stages and eventually became something. AJ and Daniels became a team. The X Division had AJ, Joe, and Daniels at the top, which was perfect, and that was arguably the best. I would say definitively the best that the X Division ever was. And it's like, and they still had guys like Low Key and Chris Sabin and guys like that underneath to really fill out the division. So that was probably my favorite era of TNA, probably from Bound for Glory 05. Let's say, like, the first episode on Spike leading into Bound for Glory 05 up to about Bound for Glory 06. That's probably my favorite run from TNA, because then after that they kind of went cold and, creative woes. Maybe a little bit too much reliance on Vince Russo. But it was like you took the good, you took the bad, and you just kind of took it for what it was. And that's kind of Impact's place in history. It's like there's a lot of bad, but there was also a lot of good too. If you kind of, wash the poop off the diamond, you can find something to enjoy. And typically with TNA, I would find something to enjoy. And again, I liked having it around. And I'm impressed that they've managed to survive as long as they have, especially with the changes in the wrestling landscape. Not only did they lose their TV spot on Spike and everything, and that whole kerfluffle and everything that went wrong with that, they also had to adjust to the internet age and the social media age and the streaming age, which they've managed to do. They've managed to survive, again, going on 20 years now. And this pay-per-view definitely celebrated that, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really good show. So let's start off with the pre-show. There were two matches, one for the Digital Media Championship. I have no idea what that is. I keep in mind, this is the first Impact show I've watched probably since Tessa beat Sami Callihan for the title, so before COVID. I haven't watched Impact for quite a while, so this is the first, my first taste of it in a bit. But Rich Swann successfully defended the title against Brian Myers. Rich Swann was, actually, I take that back. I think I saw the show where Rich Swann lost the title to Omega. I think that might have been the last Impact show I saw, but when Omega was the champion. So, but either way, I haven't watched much Impact the last couple of years. So, Rich Swann was the world champion at one point. Now he's defending a title called the Digital Media Championship on I guess that's their equivalent of the TV title, on the pre-show of their big anniversary show. And then we had the return of the Reverse Battle Royal. Notoriously TNA's worst idea ever, which was won by Shark Boy, which was pretty cool to see. And they got a bunch of guys to be in this thing. Crazy Steve, I'm looking at the list of names. Crazy Steve Slash with Father James Mitchell showed up. Zicky Dice. Johnny Swinger was in it, and he's, good lord, he's been around a long time. He's one of those guys you don't realize how long he's been around. David Young, who was kind of the comedy jobber when I first started watching TNA, he was like the anti-Goldberg, he had a losing streak angle going. Mike Jackson, who I didn't know who he was, but he was a 70-year-old man, and I'm like, who the fuck is this old guy that's doing old school around the security guardrails of this show? And apparently he's like a career jobber and journeyman that's just been around forever, and it's like, oh, we'll get this nice little 70-year-old man. Grandpa gets to go out there and have a spot. So, the Reverse Battle Royal, the whole concept of the Reverse Battle Royal is completely stupid. It's a stupid concept. But for some pre-show fluff, I kind of enjoyed this. Just as like pre-show fluff to kind of get me in the mood to experience some TNA, some total nonstop action. And again, with TNA's history, you take the good, you take the bad, you just make the best out of what you're given. But then we move on to the main card, the 957th Ultimate X match for the X Division Championship. Ace Austin defending against Alex Zane, Andrew Everett, Kenny King, Trey Miguel, and the winner, Mike Bailey, probably the most generic guy in the match, but sure. The Ultimate X match, I've talked about it before in multiple videos. The concept was one of the most unique things that TNA ever came up with, and it's one of their best ideas. Unfortunately, they pounded the damn thing into the ground to where it hardly means anything, and it's like, it's become an excuse to not have storylines for the X Division, because they can just throw them into an Ultimate X match and have them bounce all over the place. Some of the spots they did in this thing were very impressive. It's one of the better Ultimate X's I've seen since the glory days of like 05, 06, but it's kind of like Ultimate X has gotten to a point where it's like you've seen one, you've seen them all, and that's kind of how I felt about this. Mike Bailey's new X Division champ. I don't know if that was the best choice. I would have rather gone with probably literally anybody else, but hey, whatever. It's their show. They can do what they want with it. Then we had the Knockouts Tag Team Championship, because they need women's tag titles. The Influence, Madison Rayne and Tenille Dashwood. Madison Rayne's still looking good, by the way. She's holding up like a fine wine. She's very, very nice. Taking on Rosemary and Taya Valkyrie, who won the titles. This was a solid match. It was nice to see, again, a nice mix of like old faces and kind of new era Impact stars like Rosemary and Taya. Mixed in with Madison Rayne, who was around when they were on Spike TV and things like that. So it was a nice, appropriate match to have. I don't agree with the Knockouts tag titles existing, but it's where we are. And I think those might be the only two teams they have. I don't know. I haven't followed Impact week to week, although I might after watching the show because I did enjoy it. Next up, because it's TNA, we got to have a Monsters Ball match. Their signature hardcore match. And they picked the two right guys to have it. Sami Callihan, the Lucha Death Machine, taking on Moose. Moose, who's a bit of an underrated talent. I think he's the kind of guy I'm surprised he hasn't been picked up by WWE, because I feel like Vince would just go gaga for him because he's big as fuck and he's athletic. But in any case, I thought this match was very good. It was a very nice, well-done hardcore match that fortunately only had two guys in it. So, interestingly, they also brought back the gimmick of the original Monsters Ball match way back from Victory Road 04. It was between Abyss, Raven, and the Alpha Male Monty Brown. And the gimmick was all participants in the match had to lock themselves away from everybody in isolation with no food or water for 24 hours. And then ideally, they would go out there for the Monsters Ball match and be even more aggressive because they haven't eaten and haven't seen daylight in over 24 hours. That part of the Monsters Ball pretty much got dropped early on. I think they referenced it at the second one at Bound for Glory 05, but generally it's been a forgotten concept. for the Monsters Ball match. But they brought it back here, again, referencing TNA's history. The people that put the show together definitely did their homework. And I thought this match was very good and a great showcase for all the talents involved. Next up, we had a tag team match for the Impact World Tag Team Championships. The Briscoes defending against the Good Brothers. Now, it's weird not seeing the Briscoes in Ring of Honor, and that's just weird to me that they're in Impact now. It's crazy. But, yeah, this was a good match. This is a nice, solid tag team match between two teams that are exciting and fun to watch. The Good Brothers won back the Impact Tag Team titles, and that was where we got the America's Most Wanted cameo. It was great seeing Chris Harris and James Storm. They were my favorite tag team in the company when I first started watching TNA, and they're kind of an overlooked part of their history, because I think a lot of people, when they think great tag teams, they think of Beer Money more. And Beer Money was great. I love Beer Money, but America's Most Wanted was really big in TNA's early history, and I think deserves a... It was nice to see them get acknowledged, is the point I'm going to make. Next up, we had probably my favorite match on the show, the 10-man tag team match, the Impact Originals taking on Honor No More. So basically, TNA versus Ring of Honor is what this match was. And they also used this match as an excuse to get a few more people on the show. Scott D'Amore came out in his full Team Canada gear to do commentary. Dixie Carter came out to announce the mystery partner on the Impact Wrestling team. And Dixie Carter, I know, is kind of a... she gets a lot of flack, but I was always kind of sympathetic to her because I felt like she was a novice when it came to pro wrestling and desperately tried to learn and tried to understand it and tried to put her best foot forward and trying to get everything to work. And I also think some people kind of led her astray and kind of manipulated her into making bad decisions that they shouldn't have made. But, you know, I give her credit. I mean, it would have been easy to walk away from the wrestling business sooner than she ultimately did, and she worked to keep TNA afloat. And I wonder if TNA would have stayed open had it not been for Dixie Carter putting as much effort in as she did. I don't know. So it was nice to see her get acknowledged as well. But anyway, we also got Christy Hemme, who is also looking very, very good. I was like, damn, Christy, you still got it, lady. They used her as the ring announcer, and they also had Tracy Brooks at ringside because Kazarian was one of the participants. She's married to Kaz. Earl Hebner was there in the audience, and he ultimately counted the final fall as the referee. So this was a nice, like, wild and crazy cameo fest, but it was a lot of fun to watch. But yeah, the participants were, for Honor No More, with Maria Kanellis in their corner, you had Eddie Edwards, Matt Taven, Mike Bennett, PCO, God bless him, he is still going. Pierre is a class act. Reinvented himself this late in his career, and he is making it work for him. And Vinny Marseglia as the fifth man. And on the Impact Originals, we had Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin, the Motor City Machine Guns, Frankie Kazarian, Nick Aldis, the NWA's, greatest NWA champion since, I don't know, the early 90s maybe. And the mystery partner, Davey Richards, Eddie Edwards' former partner. So the entire match was, in addition to all like the TNA references and everything, and Tracy Brooks getting involved and beating up Maria Kanellis and all that other stuff, which was all fun. And Earl Hebner taking off his shirt, revealing the referee's shirt and counting the fall, which was also fun. And while I'm on the subject of Earl Hebner, I'll reference real quick. Since I did my last video, two classic referees have passed away. Earl's brother Dave, who was in poor health, and Tim White. Two of the great classic referees are no longer with us, and I know referees are often a forgotten element of professional wrestling, but they are very, very important, and I think those were two of the best. If we're going to have a referees Hall of Fame, I would think the Hebners and Tim White would absolutely have to be in there. So my condolences to their friends and family, and I wish them all the best during a very hard time. And I was very sad to hear that both of them had passed. But it was great to see Earl doing what Earl does best, screwing people out of matches and counting falls. But but aside from all the crazy stuff, they were working the match around the American Wolves, Davey Richards and Eddie Edwards, clashing with each other, the former partners being on opposing sides in this particular conflict. And that gave the match a little bit more of a story than it wouldn't have had otherwise. Otherwise, it would have been just bodies flying all over the place. But this is a bodies fly all over the place type of match where I was completely okay with it because it was like I said, it was like a big party, and this was like the big Impact celebration style match that was on here, and it was very enjoyable. Of course, the Impact Originals won, and of course they took a big bow at the end where they held all their arms up and everything, and that was feel good. That felt nice. I enjoyed this. It was fun. It was just fun. It was probably my favorite thing on the show. Then we had the first ever Queen of the Mountain match for the Impact Knockouts Championship with Mickie James as guest enforcer, guest referee. With Tasha Steelz defending against Chelsea Green, Deonna Purrazzo, who has done really well for herself in Impact. She was an NXT girl that got dropped and really made a name for herself outside of them within Impact. Mia Yim, who's also fresh off of a WWE run that didn't go very well, and Jordynne Grace. Oh, I should also note, speaking of, I don't know, I mentioned Mia Yim, and that reminded me of the failed group that she was in. Oh God, what were their names? The Wrestling Antifa. I want to say Retribution. I forget. They were so bad, I've already forgotten it, but that didn't go very well. D'Lo Brown did show up in the 10-man tag dressed in his Aces and Eights gear, which I loved because I actually liked Aces and Eights. I thought the angle was actually okay until everybody started unmasking, but like the actual setup for the angle and Bully Ray being revealed as the leader was like that was all actually really good. But in any case, yeah, I'm a bit of a D'Lo Brown mark, so I was happy to see him. But anyway, getting back to the women's match, first ever Queen of the Mountain match. Follows the same rules as the King of the Mountain match, complete with the penalty box and having to hang the belt after climbing up the ladder rather than pulling the belt down, the reverse ladder match format. The King of the Mountain or Queen of the Mountain, it's a match that has been derided over the years, and rightfully so, because the rule structure is just a convoluted mess. However, I typically enjoy the match. It's this weird thing. I know the match is stupid, but I typically find myself enjoying them. I can sit here and talk about the specific King of the Mountain matches. I actually remember specific ones, which is not true with Ultimate X, where with Ultimate X, a lot of the times they all kind of blend together, and I don't really remember them all that well. But King of the Mountain is like, oh yeah, I remember the '07 one. I remember the '05 one that Raven won. I remember the '06 one, which almost ended in a riot inside the Impact Zone when Jarrett won again. I can recall specific ones. I remember the 2009 one where Joe helped Angle win the title. And they're typically entertaining matches because even though the rule structure is ridiculous, I think the fact that they can have like just these action-packed car wrecks, like Money in the Bank style matches out of them, people kind of forget that the rules are stupid and they kind of go with it. The first King of the Mountain match, when they were still doing the weekly pay-per-views, that was a really good one too. It's just, I don't know, it shouldn't work, but it kind of does. I don't know why. But, and this match is kind of the same. My biggest knock on this match actually is, and I hate to say it because I love her, but Mickie James as an enforcer played way too big of a role in this match, where it felt like every time they cut to her, she was taking a bump or something. And to me, like the enforcer or referee spot, that should be like, you get one spot that impacts the outcome of the match, and that's it. You're not an active participant throughout the entire match, because then it like takes the attention off the actual competitors and puts it on you. And granted, I know it's Mickie James, and I love her to death, but it was just like, she was more of a distraction to the match than anything else. But the spots that these girls took and the bumps they took were, yeah, I mean, not for me. I wouldn't do it, but they did it. Good on them. There was that one, I think it was Chelsea Green and I want to say Deonna, I'm not sure, but it might have been Mia Yim, but they fell off a ladder through a table outside the ring, and I'm like, that's a bad landing. I hope they're okay. All indications are that they are. But the Queen of the Mountain match, it was not my favorite thing on the show, but it was fun for what it was, and Jordynne Grace won the Knockouts title by the time it was over, so you got a new champion out of it. And honestly, on Slammiversary, which was always the King of the Mountain match pay-per-view anyway, it felt appropriate to have this match on there, and having the women do it is a nice little way to kind of separate it from all the other attempts at doing this type of match. So Yeah, it would have felt incomplete if you didn't have a King of the Mountain match on this show like this. So I enjoyed it, even though I can see a lot of people not liking it because of the confusing rule structure. And it's like, no, I hear you. You're not wrong. And next up was a match that I had absolutely no interest in, but ended up loving by the time it was over. Josh Alexander defending the Impact World title against Eric Young. With his group, Cody Deaner, which I didn't know Cody Deaner was still wrestling, and Joe Doring. I believe they're called Violent by Design or something like that. Basically, it's Eric Young still being Insanity, like he was in NXT and WWE main roster, without calling it Sanity. But yeah, they were underutilized in WWE, so it's only fair that he would try to get a run outside of them to kind of make what should have worked there work somewhere else. But in any case, I looked at this for the main event, and I was kind of like, really? That's your main event? All these other fun matches that you got, and that's your main event? Really? Okay. Granted, they had a lot of like multi-person, and this is another show that had like maybe a few too many like multi-person spot festy type of matches. Had an Ultimate X, had a King of the Mountain, had a 10-man tag. It was a very busy card, but King of the Mountain, Queen of the Mountain match. And so I appreciated having a one-on-one main event, but like on paper, like Josh Alexander's a guy. I look at him and I go, yeah, he's a good worker. I'm not saying he's a bad worker or anything, but it's like, he's your world champion, really? You couldn't come up with anybody. It's kind of like how I think people probably felt about Bob Backlund back in the day. Nobody disagreed that Bob Backlund was an amazing worker, like a technical wizard inside the ring. Nobody's going to make that argument. However, when you think of like the top guy, you expect somebody with like charisma and a character that's larger than life, and Backlund definitely did not have that. And that's kind of how I feel about Josh Alexander. It's like, look, no, he's absolutely a really good worker, but world champ? Really? Okay. And you put him up against Eric Young, who's probably most famous in TNA for being a comedy character more than anything else. Even though he is a former TNA champion, which he won like right after Daniel Bryan did at that one WrestleMania, which is one of the most embarrassing things that TNA ever did. Trying to like ape off of what they did at WrestleMania, that was just that was not great. But by the time this match was over, I ended up loving it, and the main reason I did is that they basically used this match as a TNA Greatest Hits album, where the two guys, mostly Alexander, he took moves from AJ Styles, he took moves from Samoa Joe, he took moves from, I think Daniels came up at one point, Kurt Angle he used a lot. Obviously, his outfit looked like Kurt Angle's Main Event Mafia outfit. Got to bring up the Main Event Mafia in this. And Eric Young at one point used a guitar, which was an obvious reference to Jeff Jarrett. So this felt like TNA's entire history crammed into one match between the two guys trying to use every move in the book to reference TNA's past history. So it was a lot of fun. And they undid the ring corner, the ring mat in the corner, which is very rare. You don't see it often, although AEW recently did it with Blood and Guts. Just the last match they did. They started to do it. So... I thought the match was a lot of fun. It was a great main event to close on. I was like, oh, okay, so I was wrong. That match was a blast. I enjoyed it. So, yeah, that's kind of a microcosm for this show. I went into it with somewhat low expectations, and I came out of it pleasantly surprised and kind of feeling nostalgic for the old TNA and having a fun party, just... enjoyed the ride all the way through. It was a really fun pay-per-view, top to bottom. I'm not going to sit here and say it's like the most amazing thing ever, but if you're a TNA fan and you remember like the old TNA from, let's say their first like 5-6 years or so, you're probably going to really enjoy this show because it was just it was a love letter to anyone and everyone that ever was a fan of TNA or Impact Wrestling throughout the last 20 years. So, congratulations to Impact. You made it to 20 years, and it's an amazing milestone for them. And again, it looks like they've kind of settled into their own little niche, and they can exist and continue to put out fun wrestling shows for as long as they want to. So, and that's definitely good. I think the wrestling world is better off the more options there are out there and the more companies there are out there producing talents that can go elsewhere and make WWE better, or make AEW better, or make Ring of Honor better, or go have a run in New Japan and get better, and then take that back to Impact and make Impact better, or whatever, you know. It always helps to have more options out there, and I'm happy to say that Impact has lasted 20 years, and I think it's great for them. But I think I have rambled long enough. I have talked about anything and everything under the sun. I think the one major topic I didn't get to was Sasha Banks' release, unofficial release. We don't know yet, but I'm gonna wait until it's official, if that makes any sense, before I make any comment on that, and we'll see. We'll see what happens to Sasha moving forward, but. I'm still waiting on developments on MJF and what's going on there with that whole situation. So, who knows? But yeah, this is my first video back. Hopefully it was worth it. And I've got other videos lined up for you guys, so I hope you enjoy it. But if you want to see more from me, you can follow me on Twitter. The link is in the description. I've also got a nice little banner here at the bottom of the screen, so you should be able to see that. Be sure to follow me and listen to my random ramblings while I am on Twitter. And if you want to keep up with this channel, you can like, subscribe, and hit the little bell icon down below so you'll get notified when I post new videos. And also check me out, Weekday Warriors of Wrestling. Eric and I have kind of slipped as far as getting new episodes out, but we're going to try and get another one out there soon, because again, there's a lot to talk about, and I've got to get his take on certain things. But that link is also in the description. So thanks again, everybody, for watching. I apologize for the delay, but life definitely got in the way, and among a bunch of other things. So yeah, I was really sorry about the delay, but hopefully the wait was worth it. But that is all I have for you now. Thanks again, everybody, for watching, and I will see you all later.